Call to order the 867th meeting of the Board of Directors of MSAD number 27. Roll call.
Keith Jandro, Kerr Susi,
Here.
Jacob Terrio,
Here.
Toby Jandro,
Here.
Barry Willett, Gary Sibley,
Here.
Sarah Ashley,
Here.
Caitlin Daigle, and Emily Willett.
Any adjustments to the agenda?
So, yeah, I made a mistake on the agenda. The period of public participation should come before the adjournment of the meeting. So please switch number 7 and 8 so that the public participation can come before we actually, excuse me, and switch the two last items. And also after the public participation, we should entertain a motion to enter into executive session to consult with legal counsel if that's so the desire of the board at that time.
Approval of the minutes for the 866th meeting, November 6, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Approval of the financial statements for October. Emailed them today.
Yeah, they were emailed.
We can table them.
Table it.
Move to table it.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Items of business, old business.
The last time we met, we discussed the information regarding the annual evaluation of the superintendent. At that time, I had reached out to the Maine Department of Education to find out their guidance on who evaluates me now that I speak for 4 boards. Their initial response was that it should be the Valley Unified Board because that represents all the 3 boards. There were some questions regarding the membership of that board because some of the members of the Valley Unified Board actually work for me. Is it appropriate for administrators who work for me to actually be evaluating me because they all can't stand me? So I went back and sought legal counsel on this, and it is the advice of legal counsel that because my contract is with MSAD 27, as you are the fiscal agent of Valley Unified, and my contract says MSAD 27, that this board evaluate me for this school year. So that is the advice. What I would ask at that point, though, is after the evaluation, I would take my evaluation from you all and share it with the other boards, so everyone acknowledges what that evaluation says, and then give them some input to also add to the annual goals for me for next year. Is that fair with everyone?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Do we have any new business?
Just under Valley Unified, we have, under new business, we have MSAD 27 and the Valley Unified School Board, Regional School. Last meeting, you all put together a subcommittee tasked with looking at some legal firms to possibly represent you in regards to the interlocal agreement. Also looking at the major capital school construction program and seeing if that was followed or can be altered in some way to better help our region, and then also to possibly examine site selection as well, although we weren't quite sure if the site selection was one thing that this board wanted to pursue. There was a discussion about that, but I did reach out to legal counsel on your behalf based on the firm that you were interested in, and if you so choose, we can have a virtual meeting at the end of this meeting with that legal counsel to advise you on what it is you want to know and your next steps. So I don't know if any of the subcommittee members wanted to reflect on that short meeting we had last week.
No, subcommittee met and decided that who they would talk to. I think this is an exploratory meeting more than anything else. And that's what we agreed to. I think we erroneously, as a subcommittee, agreed to hire somebody. We don't have that I don't think we have that authority. I think the school board will need to make a motion.
Can't hear you.
Come closer, Bob.
No, I mean, the people behind me.
This isn't the Coliseum, Bob. So, yeah, I think the board's gonna have to make a motion on that to decide whether or not to hire counsel, and we're gonna have to vote on that before we can do that. I think we could talk to him beforehand, before hiring him if we want to. But, Gary, does that sum it up?
I think so, yeah. That was my original understanding of it, but it got kind of misconstrued in the last meeting, the
Yeah.
subcommittee meeting, but
I think we can fix
Jake?
it.
I agree. And I do have an engagement letter if you do so choose to move forward. The engagement letter will have to be signed by the board chair. He's not here, but we can deal with that later.
Okay, we'll enter into a period of public participation. Anyone that has something that they'd like to contribute, we'd love to hear it. It's nice to see, never seen a turnout like this for the school board meeting in the 12 years I've been here. This is the way it should be, because we know what you want. We hear your voice. Ask you to keep it somewhat brief and to the point. If someone else has already said something you agree with, if you want to just, not reiterate it, but just say that you agreed with it. Give us a feeling for where the community wants to go. It would certainly be beneficial, so if anyone would like to voice their concerns or opinions, or Bob?
I just wonder, I haven't seen any figures on how much money we're either gonna save or spend more than we're spending now on our school. Has there been a study done on that?
The major capital school improvement program is a 21-step program that you have to follow prescriptively, one step at a time. We are on step 6, which is site selection. We cannot go on to the next steps, which would answer those questions, until we have ratified site selection. To answer your point, though, there have been facility studies done. Actually, at 9 o'clock last night, I received the initial facility studies report, and I will be meeting with my facilities committee from this SAD, from 33 and from Madawaska, to go over their respective schools, and then those facility studies will be shared out with the public. That does give cost estimates on what it would cost for your current facilities to be renovated up to code, if you will. So those are coming. With respect to comparative costs from a new facility to our current facilities, that cannot be done until architects have designed said facility, determined what kind of heating system is going to be in said facility, and all of those things. So those are things that we want, but can't come until we get to those steps.
You would almost think that before you buy an item, you know what it's gonna cost.
It's not my step, it's the state of Maine steps, and we have to follow it. It is a backwards process, in my opinion.
Who conducted the facility studies?
WBRC Architects.
Is it the same group that advised the unified group in the process that's going on right now?
Yep, facility studies and site selection are wrapped into one step. It's actually called new versus renovation studies.
Was that required as part of the process? You choose just one vendor?
They did not receive the entire contract for engineering. They received phase 1, which gets us up to site selection, but that does include facility studies. It'll be up to the Valley Unified Board whether or not they want them to continue beyond site selection.
And just to question, I guess, back to what Bob was getting at, is that, are there not comparables that you can end up making a comparison based on square footage of operational costs versus what we're currently spending?
Yeah, so they are examining currently our utilities for the past X amount of years. They've gathered that data, looking at what we spend here at CHS, what they spend at the tech center. So they're compiling that data. What's the missing component is what to compare it to. The last conversation I had was the possibility of comparing it to recently constructed schools. However, recently constructed schools vary in size, so it's hard to compare something that we're going to be going into versus what.
It would give you, as in the real estate business, give you dollars per square foot is what the operational costs are. Would it be in real estate or commercial business?
Right.
can we not come up with something like that? So that we can know?
And that's in the hand, it's not my expertise, but it is in the hands of the engineering firm at this time.
With which firm?
The same firm, WBRC.
Is that something we can to request from them?
I
In this
requested it
process?
again today. So I continually request things on a daily basis.
When could we expect to see something?
Good question.
Be good to know.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyone else?
I'll have to kind of double clutch. I've been speaking French for the past couple of days, and so don't be insulted or offended if I find myself switching from one language to the other. It should come naturally, to the valley, but I'm afraid it doesn't always. I want to congratulate you guys on your study. You've had 3 years, or maybe more, but this is quite a document, and I've had less than a week. And I have to tell you that I'm sorely disappointed. Well, first let me tell you why I'm so interested in what is happening. I'm a historian, fully accredited, with numerous publications in my name. And as a historian, before I put an alphabet down, I want to be damn sure that I know what I'm talking about. I want to be fully documented. So I studied this as carefully as I can, and I've given it a lot of thought. And I don't like it. I don't know, maybe with more comments from the people, with further study and reflection, I might change my mind. But at some point, while I'm still vertical, yeah, I do want to update my history of the St. John Valley, which is about 1,000 pages, just short of 1,000 pages long. If you're not familiar with it, you should make it a high priority. After all, it is your history and mine. Looking at this document, I find that the number of miles, I hate to talk with my back to the people. I never did that to the students. And ordinarily, I never sat down. I always like to keep eye contact, like it or not. And looking at this document, what, in my humble opinion, should have been the very, very first priority. I would have accorded it 99.9% of the points. Instead, we put it at the very end of the study, right at the end, at the bottom of the page. Now, does that make sense to you? No, not me, everyone. No.
Just which study are you talking about, Mr. Harry, just for clarification?
I'm sorry.
Which study are you talking about?
The strategic Valley Regional School.
The strategic plan or
Yes.
site selection or?
Well, it's a mismatch of everything,
Oh.
from which I've extrapolated some comments.
You've been working on it a week? You've been looking at it for a week?
Like I said, yes, I've had this document for less than a week. And so I've had minimum time to study it, but I'm not a dullard. And I can think, and particularly, I can reason. I can draw conclusions. And the very last item on the site selection, the criteria, the matrix. You all know what a matrix is. The matrix, the very last item is transportation by bus. And I find that there's a map here of northern Maine, and interestingly enough, excluded is Allagash Dickey. You know, there are students in Allagash Dickey. And I don't know if I can find that here, but you can figure it out yourselves. Oh, so I computed the time it would take approximately for students to travel from Dickey to Fort Kent to Frenchville. And grosso modo, I find that it would be approximately 3 hours, a bus ride of approximately, estimated conservatively, from Dickey to Frenchville at 20 more miles. 20 more miles on the school bus, you don't. I came up conservatively with 3 hours, 30 minutes. Now, keep in mind that one of the things that I noticed, one of the points in the matrix, was the impact of the site on education, on the educational environment, in fact. Comme vous savez, as you know, I do some picketing at the University of Minnesota, Fort Kent, and I can see the bus from Allagash, Dickey go by. There we go again. There are students from Allagash, Dickey, and Coquitlam, still further, who have a hard time getting to the high school for breakfast. I would invite members of the panel, but in particular, I would like to invite the Commissioner of Education and the State Education Committee to come to the Valley and go up to Dickey, get on the school bus with Benny, and drive down to Fort Kent. And then, from Fort Kent, going through, because that takes time, 2 sets of traffic lights, a railroad crossing, another one just as you get to Frenchville, you have to stop. Sometimes you stop. It takes time. And then see what the commissioner and his committee thinks about subjecting students to that kind of torture. And then you wonder, how is it that they don't do well on their SAT scores? How is it that they sleep in class? How is it that they're bored? Well, go on. Try it. And then I'd like the commissioner and his committee to get back on the bus with me and drive back to Allagash Dickey. It's an experience. Let me tell you about an accident. I was still in high school. That'll tell you of my antiquity.
Mr. Verity, in the interest of giving everyone an opportunity to talk, if you could maybe finalize your comments.
I'll do my best.
Okay, I
But
appreciate it.
bear in mind that you guys have been meeting for 3 years. If you'll accord me a few more minutes, it would be, I think the audience would appreciate it. Yes, thank you.
We want to hear about
And then I would like to see Commissioner Hasten, I believe is his name, and his committee, there's a whole committee if possible, take the school bus with Benny and drive back to Dickey. God, what are those people thinking? C'est fou. It's insane. In my, as I said, humble opinion, what it should be is that school bus transportation, instead of being the last item on the matrix, should have been number 1. There might have been one meeting lasting maybe 15 minutes, half an hour or so. I would have put the question to Madawaska. Are you willing to travel 20 miles? The kids from Dickey travel 52. Are you willing to drive 20 miles to Fort Kent if the school were to be in Fort Kent? And if they said no, I would have said, well, that's the end of the meeting. In the codex, to arrive at the site in Frenchville, wherever it may be, they used a formula, a mathematical formula, c'est très compliqué, based apparently on the number of students from Allagash-Dickey. The assumption being, and maybe they have real numbers, that there aren't too many students up there. It does not matter a damn how many students there are from up there. If their parents are paying their taxes, if they are citizens of the United States, they are subjects of the state of Maine, by law, under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. A lawyer will ask you that. That's the first question he'll probably ask you. What law has been violated? Law? Yours. They want to know the law. Students, whether there is half a dozen or 2 dozens from Allagash-Dickey, Winterville, Quimby, on the Caribou Road, yeah, all the way down to Sinclair, it's Lac-des-Degues, down to Marquis Road, Poche-Doul. And by the way, I love Poche-Doul. I would like to see the signs in the valley. It's unique, probably in the world. And it identifies us. Well, I did nothing against it. They changed it. Okay, I love Father Marquette, took a trip with him. I took several trips with him. But why not put 2 signs? You know, in the valley, Van Buren's a good example. They even changed the names of our roads. Van Buren, all the streets used to be named after saints. Don't you change ça? There's only one street left now that's named after St. Mary, next to the church. If you go to the west or Midwest, they all kept the names. Spanish, San Diego, El Paso, Rio, etc., etc., Los Angeles, Les Anges. Made the name of minor streets. A small group of people in Van Buren changed the name. Now, anyway, I know you're getting impatient here, so I'll offer an option. My parents used to say, and I'm sure some of you have heard it, they would say, don't criticize unless you've got something better to offer. Si tu peux rien dire de mieux, ferme ta gueule. I have something better to offer. One of the things I don't like about this regional school, and I'll tell you, it divides us. The history of the St. John Valley is when the hand was in a clenched fist. Van Buren, Madawaska, Saint-Agathe Van Buren, Fort Kent. Si nous voulons être respectés, don't let anybody divide us. On ferme les doigts. Comme ça. C'est comme ça qu'on a survécu. I was being interviewed by Susan Bernard many, many years ago, and we were celebrating the Webster-Asberg Treaty. Des gros. Finally, she asked me what I thought about the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. I said, you know, I find little to celebrate about. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty divided us. And listen to this. It created a ghetto. Across it created a ghetto, a French Catholic ghetto, in a loyalist province. In Maine, it created a French Catholic ghetto in a Yankee state. Yankee and essentially, not entirely, Protestant. Ghetto is not nice. Read my history of the St. John Valley. You don't have to do the whole 1,000-page. Read the preface. So I have a better proposal for you. Why not take the $100 million, divide it in 4, give Van Buren $25 million. C'est trop d'argent. $25 million, c'est pas acheter au cochon. Madawaska would get $25 million. What can you do for $25 million? Think about it. St. Agathe, Frenchville, $25 million. Fort Kent. What could Fort Kent do for $25 million? Well, among other things, maybe we'd have another music program. Possible? And maybe, just maybe, we'd have a real French program to rediscover our ethnicity from K-12. At some point, UMFK perhaps will catch up. Never know. We have to hope. So that's what I would suggest. $25 million for each of the districts. You can do a lot of good with $25 million without dividing the country. I mean the valley, without dividing the valley. Because, look, just one example, okay? We speak a lot about quid pro quos. Let me tell you about a quid pro quo. Il y en a eu beaucoup in the history of the St. John Valley. In 1948, we wanted to close UMFK, well, it was the Madawaska Training School, and that's the name, by the way, for schools on Indian reservations. That's what they thought about us. Okay, so finally, they were convinced to keep the school. But they said there'll have to be a quid pro quo. Guess what the quid pro quo was? They said you'll have to give up all that land that you own, where the playground is now, the baseball diamond. That was all land that belonged to the Madawaska Training School. And you know what? Crocker used to maintain a farm to keep the cost down. Every fall, they'd get 10,000 to 12,000 cans from American Can Company and from the farm. And on that farm, they had anywhere from 20 to 30 heads of cattle. They had hogs. They had their own brooder for poultry and turkeys, up to 400 approximately. The kids on work study were down in the basement of Sear Hall, and they'd play on the peas, and they'd take off the corn, and that would be put in their own, which they created themselves, well, it wasn't refrigerated. And once in a while, Dick Crocker would go downstate to the other institutions, and he'd bring butter for them the gap during pendant le rationnement. So, $25 million, no, let me finish. They said, you'll have to give up the farm. Why? That was a real positive. Just what they could have done is given the Madawaska Training School a 2-year farming program. Humpy now is doing that.
Mr. Berry,
Yes.
I'd like to thank you for the history lesson.
Yes.
It's very interesting, but we do need to
And
move on.
I'll close with this, but keep in mind $25 million. And share it, don't divide us. Oh, and I've got to say one more thing. Those of you who think for a minute that bigger is better, I have news for you. Bigger is not better. In this regional school, you will probably not have 2 basketball teams. 1. You probably will not have 2 baseball teams. 1. You probably will not have 2 volleyball teams. 1. You probably won't have 2 school papers. 1. You probably won't have 2 yearbooks. 1. You probably will not have 2 glee clubs. 1. Etc., etc. That limits opportunity. Since when is bigger? Ever since the creation of the SADs, and I worked because I developed some of them. Ever since the creation of SADs, bigger is better. SAT scores. I'm sorry, I apologize for
No, thank you.
exceeding
Very
my time,
interesting.
but it's something that had to be said.
Sharon?
Don't divide us.
So I have a clarification question for you all, because I know some people, this is the first meeting that they come to, and some have been to other meetings. But can you explain to the group the process that would occur if there would be a vote against, what it would mean to the building, whether or not it would be built, yes or no? So the process moving forward in regards to what votes mean, changing votes, how that would occur, because I think it's important that everyone understands that legal part of it and our obligation to the Valley Unified and what exactly does that mean. So in terms of reallocating money to 4 different buildings, I don't think that that's written in the plan and that is even an option at stake here. So whoever wants to entertain that question. Sorry.
So, yeah, reallocating that money is not something that's possible. So although I like Mr. Parry's suggestion to divide the money and conquer, it's not an option. It's a regional school project, and the whole idea is we had to have 3 partners come together in the spirit of collaboration to make something better for themselves. That was the intent of what it is. And yes, bigger is not always better, but a lot of the programs that Mr. Parry just mentioned don't exist in our schools currently. Glee Club, we haven't had that for, I don't even know what that is. Our kids wouldn't even know what that is. So, we don't even offer a lot of those programs. But to answer your question, if our region turns down this, we don't get a second redo. We don't get to say, okay, let's try again this different way. If our region turns this down, the money's gone. The money goes to a different project somewhere else, and that's exactly what will happen. Does that answer your question, Chef?
Yeah.
Paul?
In reference to Mr. Perry's comments, where in fact are the current bus and or turnaround at the Allegheny area?
Yeah. Peter, can you tell us how long the transportation run from the furthest point in the Allagash to Fort Kent?
First student in Allagash is picked up at 6:25, 6:30 in the morning. And that same student is dropped off here at the high school or the elementary school at 7:50 to 7:55, depending on the weather. They have time for breakfast. They have time to do what they've got to do with it. And they can travel into those, that's the normal travel time. I wish Mr. Parody would still be here because he comments a lot of things that are very important in his decision, but he decides to dump a lot of stuff on all of us and leave. So I take that as a little bit of an insult on that table, but that's fine. I'll deal with that. I'd rather just, make that comment public right now. And I'm not going to be a historian, and I'm not going to talk about all kinds of stuff other than bus run.
So an hour and a half from furthest point in Allagash to Fort Kent. And how long is the commute from Fort Kent to the tech center?
13 miles. We do it 4 times a day. We're doing it currently. It's 13 miles. And yes, we're crossing 3 railroad tracks. And we leave here it takes us approximately 20 minutes to get from one site to the other. So it's not at the end of the world when we stop and figure what's going on across the river. They're picking up students that are further than we live in, our students live in Allagash, and commute them to Edmundston. They do that daily.
We have an elementary school in Canada, in Clare, New Brunswick, which is doing a lot similar to what we would be having in our own communities, and our high school students would be traveling to Edmundston. So, folks,
Pete, how
really
about Winterville? How far is it from Winterville? How long?
shorter from Winterville than it is from Allagash. And you know, some people had decided that they weren't gonna consider these communities, but these communities are all part of us, whether they pay tuition or not. They're all our students, and we all take care of those students equally.
Ms. Willett, does that answer your question? Paul, does that answer your question?
Yep. What's the location, Peter? Is it indicated to pick him up for Allagash?
The furthest family that we have in Allagash has recently moved away. They're back into St. Francis, and we're just crossing the Dickey Bridge.
Thank you.
So I can attest to what he just said. Growing up in Canada, I did go to a community high school in Edmundston. Growing up in Baker Lake, where we had kids further away from Connors, all the way to St. Ann, it was a 45, 50-minute ride on a good day. It was fine. The kids, you know, it was just a fact of life. We lived with it. It was not a deterrent for any activity. I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, I did it, I lived it. I really don't see
Yeah,
what
but
the
you're
issue
going from
is.
45 minutes to almost 2 hours.
It's not 2 hours.
Pete, just confirm,
It's
is
an
an hour and a
hour and a
half,
half.
Pete?
Frenchville is,
French,
Frenchville's 2 hours.
Yeah, to
An
get to
hour and a
Frenchville.
half. And 75% of those kids drive. We're not talking little kids. We're talking big kids here. I mean, and they're gonna have Wi-Fi.
13
We didn't have Wi-Fi. Imagine that.
I think it would be helpful for a representative of those that want to keep the school in Fort Kent to explain why, because I'm not really clear, besides the travel time. Is anybody interested in explaining that?
Would anyone like to speak, as Carol just said, in favor of it, or why you feel it has to be in Fort Kent? Okay. Anyone else there? Carol?
I'd just like to know, I work in Madawaska, and I hear what's going on over there regarding what they consider arrogant. I'm not saying everybody, but the people that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of people every day. And some of their concerns, and I think some of us have to have a little bit of empathy, because they have rational concerns. The distance travel, I don't think, is the big deal. I think that as far as the towns are concerned, Fort Kent has the least to lose in any scenario. As far as this building, it has the greatest chance of being repurposed, even though there's no guarantee that UMFK would have any interest in it. But the Madawaska School is in bad shape, and there's virtually no chance of it being repurposed, and neither is the St. Agatha School. And then their property values are not so good. I think we've had building permits in Fort Kent that far outpaced Madawaska just this year alone. There's just nobody moving to Madawaska. And so they are very worried about their property values. Because, hey, who's gonna move to Madawaska if the school's in Fort Kent? Especially if you're a young family and you're a professional or whatever. So they're looking at it that way, and I think as a community, I think we have to have a little bit of empathy for that. I think we're all the St. John Valley, we're all trying to accomplish something. And then you have to ask yourself what Ben said, we have one chance at this. And after they see what they consider arrogance from Fort Kent, when it comes to vote, the chances of them voting yes all right, has just gone down exponentially. That's our one vote, and we're gonna sit here and go, okay, throw it all away, $100 million. The last time Northern Maine had this amount of money invested in Northern Maine was Loring Air Force Base. And they have $150 million going into a bridge in Madawaska, and on the heels of that would be $100 million going into Valley Unified. So I think we have to consider, yes, we all have good reasons, but are we willing to throw it all away? Thank you.
That $100 million there, that was, I was told that was there 30 years ago, is that true? The state had that?
The
I'll go to my
original,
historian.
the original legislation, Larry, that promoted these comprehensive integrated 9 through 16 facilities is apparently around 20 years old, okay? But there was an early attempt that failed, and it was not put out there anymore. Existing facilities and some of those needs were put at the top of the priority list. And then this came back out when basically the LePage administration said that old model there of forcing people, these forced marriages, and we're going to punish you by withholding money if you don't get into your RSUs and your AOSs. They wanted to do away with that, and they instead wanted to provide incentives for people to cooperate. So they dusted off this legislation because they recognize that the future of rural education is going to, in the state of Maine, is going to result from consolidating schools. But they wanted to do more than that. They didn't want to just save money. They wanted to also ensure that they were accelerating progress toward college degrees, both community college as well as university degrees, to have an immediate impact on regional and state workforce development. Because the state of Maine, like many other older states, is in crisis. A lot of people are retiring, not enough qualified people, ready and able to fill those positions. So they want to accelerate acquisition of college diplomas. So they dusted off that legislation, brought it back, and put it on the table.
And $100 million is not guaranteed, it's what's allocated for the project. So the project could be up to $100 million depending on whatever happens with it.
Peter, are you referring to the Baldacci administration when they were forcing AOSs and RSUs to get together? Yeah, and the LePage administration allowed people to break up. After that was conducted, so in 2017, a study was done, and there was 33 that had pulled out within 10 years. And as of 2017, there's an additional 40 that are wanting to pull out of their consolidations that were there. Yeah. Which I guess none of the group here has been made privy to in this process that we're going through, is that there was failures that have happened when it was forced by the Baldacci administration that was there. Right. So how are we going to make this any different, that we're going to make this one successful? This is incentivized. When you're talking 77 of them, 73 of them have failed. This is incentivized, Steve. It's not a forced marriage. This is a voluntary marriage. Okay? All the parties entered into this voluntarily. Under the old AOS and RSU model, that was forced, or you were going to lose funding. This was, you get together, and we're going to provide you funding.
And a new school.
Funding for the school, or funding to...
Funding
for the school and other grants that we received under the FEDES programs and the Embrace program. So we don't know what's going to be inside the building, we don't know what the building is going to cost, but we know we're going to get more money. We know we're going to get up to $100 million for this facility as long as... We don't know what it's going to cost to run the place, and we don't know what funding we're going to get going forward. But that's going to come in the next phase of the project. And at the very end, if people don't like those costs, then they can vote it down. All this is approving a site. That's all it is. Then those next phases where the cost analysis and the what we have now versus what we will have, that will all be on the table. That needs to go through another straw poll and then to a referendum.
and it can be defeated in referendum if people don't like the figures. So you're really not buying a car without knowing the sticker price.
But we're spending money to get to see the car.
We're spending grant monies. Ordinarily, if a region wanted to do this under the existing school construction formula, they would have to pay it. They would have to raise that money, could conceivably go all the way to referendum, have it defeated, and never recoup that money. The only way they can recoup that money is if they have a successful referendum and then it's bonded by the state.
So we
But the
weren't
state is
mandated-
paying the money up front.
This process that we're in, we weren't mandated to enter into this,
No, it was a voluntary partnership.
that we all voted on?
Yeah.
That the regional school boards, the local school boards voted and approved it. Yeah,
The
exactly.
regional service center was approved by voters at a public meeting.
Right.
In all 3 SAUs.
Yeah.
We have a law firm that's waiting for us to have a virtual meeting at 6:45, which we'll have to go into executive session for. If you guys are interested in waiting for us to come back from that, we can continue question and answer period, but we do need to meet with them at 6:45.
And I'm gonna have you guys go to the library for that.
I move to go into executive session.
All in favor?
No, it's just.
And I'll be back if you guys have questions for me.
How long do you want to take?
Folks, folks, we don't know how long the school board is going to be in with their attorneys. We do have information about the whole Valley Unified project. We're not going to force it down your throats, but if you'd be interested in hearing it, then we can certainly bring that up and at least occupy your time, you know, to learn more about the project, unless you'd rather socialize. I mean, it's entirely up to you.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you can ask questions, whatever you want to do, Larry. So, you want to hear a little bit more about the whole kit and caboodle?
When you did.
And this one's more specific to SAD 27 in the project, so it's not, you know, it's specific to this district. Those of you that were here last meeting, you heard a great deal of it. Oops, sorry, I'm in the way. But feel free to ask questions as I present, and it could just be open forum for you to you know, take a look at things. So I'm just going back 5 years, and then I show some other information as well. This district was in trouble 5 years ago when Winterville withdrew and Eagle Lake filed to withdraw, and St. Francis Elementary closed, and budgets were being rejected, and St. Francis filed for withdrawal as well. So you had St. Francis looking to leave, Wallagrass, Eagle Lake, and Winterville had just left. So there was a lot going on, and that was only 5 years ago when that was happening. So that sparked us to do some studying, and this is just a slide I put up a while ago. This is 50-year enrollment trend here in SAD 27. In 1969, you had 2,620 students. Today, you have 870. So 50 years, the trend has been consistent all the time. So that's just something that, you know, we want to make sure that is part of the conversation about why we're even looking at this. And you know, you can take a look at the communities that we're partnering with. Madawaska today is where SAD 33 was 20 years ago. We are today where Madawaska was 20 years ago. So where are we going to be in 20 years? Where are we going to be in 30 years? You know, so we're trying to rewrite the script by changing the narrative a little bit, because just following that same script doesn't seem to be working. So those are the conversations we're having. If we look at combined enrollment, today, combined enrollment between the three districts is 1533. That's pre-K to 12 combined. If you project 5 years out from now, 1330. Luckily, we're seeing kind of a stabilization in those trends, but it's kind of scary to think that, you know, that our enrollments do go down quite fast. Less enrollment means less subsidy, so this is our subsidy trends from the state for this district alone. Less and less subsidy coming in every year, which means the local taxpayers have to pick it up because salaries go up, electricity goes up, heating goes up, everything else goes up, subsidy goes down. So as taxpayers, you're saying, well, yeah, we're closing schools, we're doing all these things to try to save money. Why aren't we saving a whole bunch of money? Because it costs money to operate things. So we're trying to look for ways to make things you know, sustainable. And my fear is that this doesn't happen. When is Wallagrass going to say, we're done? And St. Francis, we're done. And St. John. And these smaller communities don't have to look long or think long and hard to decide it's cheaper for us to tuition back in, the same way Eagle Lake just did. So that's part of the conversation here as well, is we don't want to be alone, the town of Fort Kent, where we have nothing else to fall back on. We have to think about sustainability, and that's part of this as well. Question?
Is there any reason why once this happens that they can decide to pull out anyway?
The project is designed so that we put more hands in the pot, feeding the pot with more hands so that we can divide and conquer. The more money you put into the pot equally or equitably, the idea is that we don't have to bear it all on ourselves. The problem with withdrawal is that kids can come back in a tuition agreement at a much better discount than they do by paying into an SAD. So this is to provide us with an opportunity to say, okay, let's take these 3 budgets between 3 districts, put them together for a regional high school, and let's try and see. Now, we don't know those numbers yet, and we might get to that point where we look at those numbers and say, holy, whoa, can't do it. We're not there yet. So to throw out the project because a site has been selected and not know the other things yet, I think it's just premature.
So you're saying it can happen, they can pull out if that new school is, you didn't answer the question, in other words.
Any municipality can always withdraw from a district if they
So
want
it
to.
costs the other ones more money.
Absolutely. That could happen today, that could happen tomorrow, that could happen whenever. The idea, though, is to share services so that that doesn't happen. Because if we don't do anything, I guarantee it will.
I'm just being the devil's advocate.
No. It will
No,
happen.
it's a good point
These
though,
little
Bob.
towns, they're very, I mean, I've been to some of these meetings and they're very, very tight when it comes down to
Absolutely.
the taxes.
Because they're feeling stretched, and
No, they
that's.
don't want it, they don't want to hear about it.
And that's why we're hoping by
You're hoping.
distributing the cost of this school, that we'll be
Yeah, I
relieving
understand
that
where you're coming
burden.
from.
Yeah.
And we don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict that this is going to solve all the problems. But we know that if we don't do anything, this building gets older every year. The plumbing is original. The electric is original. The roof is going to be, that is not.
It can't be rebuilt, that's the problem, that you can put the money in, budget for it, and put that.
What happens every time we raise budgets in this community?
Oh, you'll have to cut somewhere else, that's what's gonna happen.
85% of the budget is people. We need people to operate the school. That leaves a small portion to do other things. And we can go around and have a fire sale and fire everyone, but then what are we left with? We're left with 50 kids in a classroom, and we're not going to go there. And that's not for this conversation, but we can't do that. We can't do that.
I just want to clarify to Bob and Larry's question, which is there's the 25-year contract, an agreement that was signed by each SAD that was there, each district that was there. They cannot get out of that agreement at this point.
The
They have
SAD,
to be- they gotta vote their way out at the end of the process.
the districts are bound by the interlocal agreement, but the
So-
member communities of those districts are not bound by that. So the town of Wallagrass is not bound by the interlocal agreement. SAD 27 is bound by it.
So if Wallagrass decides to pull out, what happens to the whole project?
If they do it before the project is initiated,
Right.
the project fails. But Wallagrass
So
will.
if any one of these towns right now decides that they don't want to be a part of SAD 27, they want a tuition, they don't like the process or don't like this whole plan,
Yep.
then the project fails.
They could file for withdrawal, but they would have to have an agreed withdrawal agreement.
What's the
by
procedure on a withdrawal agreement? Is that in the?
I'm not an expert on withdrawal agreements, Bob, and I'm not gonna advocate on.
Is it in that agreement there?
No,
It isn't?
no, it's in law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
State statute.
Not here to advocate for withdrawals, that's.
No, I know, but I'm sure there's some people that obviously want to know that. There are 2 questions that were asked a while ago.
So in June 2015, St. Francis Elementary closed, Winterville Plantation left, the budget referendums, 3 of them failed, Superintendent Dope left, Eagle Lake initiated withdrawal, Wallagrass initiated withdrawal, and I said, hey, bring it on. Bring it on. We did adopt the budget, sorry about that, we did adopt the budget on the 4th try. St. Francis petitioned to withdraw at that time as well. We lowered the budget in June 2016, and it passed for that school year. So we're off and running with some things. 2016 and 17, we agreed to go into a strategic plan between the 3 districts. It was just a planning process. Let's plan together for the future. So in September 2016, that work began. That was under the guidance that Scott was in at the university, and that was a year-long process. A committee was formed to examine cost sharing in this district, and that was an effort to try to keep our withdrawing communities from leaving. And that committee came up with a new cost share method that we still use today, which is 50% valuations, 50% pupil populations from our districts. Wallagrass voted to close Wallagrass Elementary School, and Eagle Lake voted to close Eagle Lake Elementary School in January. In February, the board of directors here approved the submission of the first FEDES grant or Embrace grant, and that was to help regionalize with our 2 district partners, 33 and Madawaska. We also submitted part 1 of this regional high school application. And then in April, we got the Embrace grant. That grant was for $635,000. $635,000 to help us with regional projects, regional ideas that we wanted to try out. And then we passed the budget that June as well. So specifically in that grant, that Embrace grant, we got all of these things: a shared curriculum coordinator between the 3 districts. We now send our 8th graders to the tech center every day for tech programs for 8th grade, because we lost our home ec programs. We lost all those programs when we were, that you had when you were kids. We don't have them anymore. So now we're sending the 8th graders so they can have some hands-on activities every day and collaborate with kids from Madawaska and Senegat and Frenchville. We have a shared music educator that we had lost here. We didn't have music anymore. This high school, we didn't have music. We brought that back. We got some district vehicles to share transportation. We had a health educator brought to the tech center for our 8th graders. Alternative ed program, shared professional development, shared software, that all helped lessen the cost for each of our districts.
What's the future of the shared, all of those shared opportunities if it doesn't go through?
These opportunities have been happening for 2 years, and I would like to hope they continue. In this fashion. We're going to need curriculum coordination. We can't afford it here alone, so the only way to get it is to share it. So I would like to say these shared opportunities continue, but I don't know if the spirit of collaboration will be the same if we back out of this project, to be honest. 2017 and 18, we got 2nd place on that part 1 of the regional school. Holton was actually a few points ahead of us. But because we were the top 3, we submitted for the Part 2 application. We began sharing those services for the first time in August, and then our strategic plan was adopted by the SAD 27 Board of Directors. Our strategic plan had 10 priorities, but I just want to highlight priority 1. This was working with focus groups of community members and businesses and kids and teachers and parents. Priority 1 said we're going to need a regional high school in our area eventually. We're going to need a regional high school because our 3 high schools are getting so small, we can't offer anything. People, you can't even imagine how small our schools are getting. You can't even imagine. Think of when you went to school, erase it. It's nothing like that anymore. We don't have a lot of kids anymore. We're graduating here in the largest school in St. John Valley. We have how many seniors this year? 60 in the largest. Senegat, Wisdom, I think they have a graduating, a senior class of 19? 19. Small. So if you don't have the kids, you don't have the teachers. You don't have the teachers, you don't have the programs. You don't have the programs, every kid takes the same classes, and then they're supposed to be career and college ready. They all took the same class. They had the same math teacher for 4 years in some schools. That's our reality. And I know bigger is not better, but super small is not better either. There's got to be some happy medium. By the way, together, we're still smaller than Caribou. We're still smaller than Caribou in Presque Isle, together. A little bit bigger than Holton. So this just gives you a perspective of, oh, it's going to be a big school. It's not. In October, we had approval for the submission of the Part 2 for the next grant, which was the FEDES grant. And then we formed our Regional Service Center. Our Regional Service Center allowed us to have some flexibility to not dismantle our 3 districts. We did not want to dismantle the 3 districts that we had, but we wanted to share services like shared superintendent, shared central office, shared teachers, shared things. We couldn't do that unless we formed, in the old laws, if we formed a new RSU or a new SAD. So we decided to go this route. We had a governing body of 9 directors, 3 from 33, 3 from 27, 3 from Madawaska. And that was the initiation of our regional service center that exists today, what we call Valley Unified. And that's the board of directors that governs it right now. There have been discussions about possibly looking at the future of this. Do we want administrators part of that representation? Originally, when we did it, it was because Giselle was leaving the superintendency at Madawaska, and Lucy played a major role, so we kind of did it that way, and Lisa was a superintendent as well. We can bring that back to the table and think about whether or not that works for us. We did form an interlocal agreement, and because we did all those things, we started getting extra subsidy from the state. So a while ago, some people asked about money. Are we getting more money because we've done this? In 18-19, we got $97,000 additional money for forming this, and this past year, we got almost $151,000 extra money because we're collaborating with partners. So yes, there is incentives. This is not forced marriage, it's incentive-based. So we are getting more funds. Next year, that amount's going to go up because we're going to try to get more funds under that umbrella. Tammy?
And Ben, like I know you were kind of keeping us informed all along, and I was going to ask that earlier when Mr. Parity was talking. Didn't we actually get more like points when they were looking at all these other schools because we had so much collaboration and because we had so many stakeholders coming to the table? Like, we were willing to work together and we were able to cover so many things, looking at the university, looking even at, you know, Edmonton, that kind of stuff. Like, isn't that why we fared so well?
Right. The existing strategic plan was instrumental.
So there are 9 regions that formed an RSC, 9 regions in the state. We are the poster children for those 9 regions. And we got that regional school because we had a strategic plan in place as a foundation, showing that we were committed before these incentives went through. We didn't know about a regional high school when we were strategic planning. It came afterwards, and we were ready for it.
So we're the first one.
We are the most equipped, and yes, we're the first ones.
In other words, we're the guinea pig.
Holton also has an approved project as well. So Holton is doing the exact same work. They're about 2 years behind us. They have an approved plan as well. Holton and Hodgson, Danforth, Southern Aroostook, Dyer Brook, that region. And Dexter, the 3rd region, is their mouth is watering, waiting for our money to fail so that they can steal it from us. It is. Our money's going to go further south if we don't take it. Our money, I earn this money, these ladies earn this money, these people earn this money, our money, it's going to go south. It's going to go south. And Southern Maine's going to win again. 2017-18 continued. Eagle Lake voted to withdraw from the district. That hurt us big time. You saw your taxes go up this year. Direct relation to Eagle Lake withdrawing. Not because we were not fiscally sound, we were not penny pinching, and we did not cut all those textbooks at the elementary school, because we did all that. But because Eagle Lake withdrew, it hurt us. Because when you lose a partner, you hurt. You hurt. Partnerships make things stronger. And then in December, the voters authorized for the Part 2 of the regional school application. We had a heck of an application, guys. Our application showed the vision for learning. It's amazing. And if you ever want to see it, come see me. I'll print you out all 150 pages of it and have your own. I'll have Peter autograph it. It's really, truly beautiful. You have to look at what the vision for this is. You have to look at it. And we won. We got first place. There were some appeals, some upset people, but at the end, we came out with 181 points. Second place, Holton, 167, all the way down to 7th place, ended up with 4 points. So we really knocked it out of the park.
Ben, did you consider the teachers, for example, how many teachers will lose their job?
So we actually, in this application, we projected retirements throughout it. So what we had projected in the application was not filling positions as people retire as we move towards this. So that we're not eliminating people and we're not hiring new people that we don't need. Because we get smaller, we want to let attrition happen naturally so that we're not firing people.
So you're going to keep the same teachers?
We're going to keep the teachers that are not retiring.
So you have a survey, how many teachers retiring in the next few years?
We have, that application has it all outlined. It has retirements, except for people that keep sticking around, all right, that don't retire on time. But it has the projections of normal retirement age. I think we did 10-year projection or 10-year projection of retirement.
Pretty sure he was looking at me when he said that, huh? Yeah. I'm eligible in June, Mr.
We
Chairman.
do not want to staff a school or overstaff a school when we don't need to, but we don't want to understaff it either. So we have 3 regional schools right now that that have minimal staff. If you combine the students, you're still going to need essentially that staff. As we start to have lower enrollments, then we're going to have to be fiscally minded about, do we need to fill positions, or can we get creative with them? There are schools like this that get really creative, where they do, you know, CTE programming for 2 weeks and then academic programming for the opposite 2 weeks. So students are always on a different 2-week cycle. We can get really creative so that it's not breaking the bank for our local people. Regional school, fully funded, staff members being fiscally minded about how we staff it. I really think we can come out in advance. Now, there's no promises, but I'm pretty sure that if we have to operate currently 4 facilities, this one, Madawaska, Wisdom, and the Tech Center, and then we move that to 1, there's got to be cost savings there. I can't guarantee it, so don't quote me. There's got to be cost savings there, because we're heating all 4 buildings, just that alone.
When you save, you know, you say save, if you would shut Friendsville and Senegat, let them decide where they want to go, either Madawaska or Fort Kent, you'd be saving a lot of money like that.
Are you going to tell Senegat and Frenchville that?
Well, it's up to them. We're saying that, we would have savings.
We could say the same for Ken.
Every community is mindful about the way they value education. So there's nobody in Senegat and Frenchville that's going to say, yeah, close down my school, I'll go. I mean, they want their school. But with a regional partnership where you're saying, hey guys, we're all going to lose a little piece of our history, but we're going to gain so much of a new future, that's the way that you have to go about this. Not forcing people to close down their schools.
It sounds great, but the bottom line, it comes down to your taxes, guys. When we can't pay these high taxes, the last 2 years in Fort Kent, we went up 4 mils. I mean, for a household, hey, that's no problem, $200. But go talk to a businessman.
Not because of the school. You didn't go up 4 mils because of the school.
Go talk to the businessman or a landowner or a farmer, and they'll tell you. Their taxes go up thousands of dollars at a time.
Trust me, I get it. I'm a taxpayer in this town. I get it. But the school is not solely responsible for the tax increases in this town. The school is not this past year.
Part of it, though, it's 65%, something like that.
Larry, did you go to the town meeting and vote for the approval of the new equipment that they purchased? Did that not increase your taxes?
Everything
because
does.
The school budget was not the reason for the large increase in your taxes this year. It was the town portion.
When you have to repair these old schools, and you have less students to do it, and you have increases in salaries, and you have and you have withdrawing communities, you're not going to be able to sustain a loan, SAD 27. You're not going to be able to sustain a loan, SAD 27, I'm telling you.
Increased funding because
And Larry, you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head a while ago. There's no doubt in your mind that if this school needed major repairs, that the citizens of our communities would say, yeah, we're going to repair our school for our students. But the flip side of that is they're going to say, but you've got to take that money somewhere else. They're not going to say that literally, but that will be the expectation, okay? And then what happens is we end up with fewer opportunities for students. Larry, you and I were in school right around the same time. My kids, you know, 2 of them just graduated. I have another one in middle school coming up. The 2 that graduated had far less opportunities than you and I did, and the one coming up is going to have less than his older brother and sister did, you know, in terms of a range of activities.
You look much younger than Peter, by the way.
Yes, and Larry makes a point of telling everyone he's much better looking than I am. But could I please just offer one thing? I'm sitting here with Caitlin Daigle, and Caitlin is a student representative to the SAD 27 school board, and I don't want to speak for her, because she certainly can speak for herself, but she said to me earlier, you know, I understand everyone's concerns, but it would be nice if they just talked a little bit about opportunities for students, if they were thinking about us. And so I just want to share with you, last year I had the opportunity to speak to 220 students in grades 6 through 12 from across the St. John Valley, okay? Went to all the elementary schools, went to the high schools, spoke with groups at the tech center, alternative learners. Here are some, and interestingly enough, when I started talking with them, okay, because they'd all heard about the school, I asked them, I said, How many of you are in support of a school? Students grades 6 through 12, 14 different groups, 220 total. Here's what the initial numbers were. 51% were in favor of a school, 30% were opposed, 11% were undecided. They hadn't made up their mind. So then I asked them, what do you see to be the disadvantages? What do you see to be the advantages of having this school? After they heard each other, and they all listened to each other's points of view, and that was my sole job, was just to say, everyone's going to have a chance to talk, but everyone also needs to take the opportunity to listen to other points of view. That's all I did, okay? At the end of that whole, all 14 of those sessions, I asked, the last question was, if you could vote today and your vote counted, would you vote for or against the school? By then, 66% were in favor, 31% were opposed, 3% were undecided. So the people who were undecided came over to the yes column. The people who were opposed remained opposed. But here are some of the distinct advantages that they talked about. Stronger athletic teams, JV teams or A and B teams, better competition of facing stronger teams from larger schools, greater variety of classes, more learning opportunities, getting to know new people and make new friends, getting to see our friends from other towns on a more frequent basis, possible additional supports and sports and after-school activities. Being in a larger school with more people will help us prepare for the adjustment to college and to develop stronger social skills for that adjustment. A new variety of teachers. A new school could help attract people to our region and could be an economic benefit. Graduates may want to return after college to live, work, and raise their children here. Better technology system that will work on a more consistent basis. More clubs, groups, and things to do because of more students. Modern energy efficient building that will cost less to heat and light. More teachers and staff. More money available for teachers, classes, and programs because less will be spent on buildings and administration. That's from the mouths of students. And I'm not going to tell you that there weren't lists of disadvantages, but those are very compelling advantages. They're seeing them. And they really want the opportunity to take advantage of those.
But 90% of these kids will be leaving. They're not going to be staying into our town. I mean, what do we have to offer? I mean, we don't have much. And I mean, again, it comes down to taxes. When the old man on the sides can't pay his taxes, how is this school going to operate? And that's what's happening. I mean, in the next 5, 10 years, people look around.
Oh, yeah.
And it's scary what's happening out there.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we have to give up on the future of education. If I told you that 100 years of evolution of flying would gone nowhere, and you were all boarding this to go to your Aruba trip next year, you'd think I was crazy. 100 years of evolution. 100 years of evolution of automotives. 100 years. 100 years of evolution of healthcare. Nobody is going to a hospital like this unless you live in a part of the world where you don't have a choice. But definitely not in this country. And if I told you, forest industry, that's really, really predominant here. Nobody's doing that anymore. But schools, have they evolved? Or do we expect schools to be the exact same way year after year after year? Sit down at a desk, be quiet, listen to a teacher who's going to lecture for hours and hours and hours. No offense to people who do that. But that's not the future for them. That's not our students' future. Our world is changing too fast. We can't act like this anymore and say it's good enough. We have to change the narrative. We have to. And the only way we can do that is to break down barriers and start new. And I'm not saying we can't do it in a school like this. We're already doing bits and pieces of it in these schools. We're already doing a great job. Our teachers are doing wonderful things in their classrooms, collaborating more than ever with their teen teachers and doing all kinds of awesome things. but our students are going to need a facility that's going to allow them to have career-embedded opportunities. They're going to have industry partners embedded in that. They're going to have university partners part of the conversations around the table. The only way to do that is under one roof. We can't do it tracking kids, 15 miles every day, back and forth, because they have some programming there, some here. They have to be under one roof. They have to be under one roof. It's the only way to get things done. So we have to really change that in order for it to matter and for us to move ahead as a society. Because you're right, it's scary. Where we're at right now is very scary. And schools are an investment in your communities. And if you treat them like they're not an investment, they're just that thing that's there that we have to pay off, that's not going to work. This is the greatest investment. You want your kids to stay? Then give them the opportunities that they say, holy crap, I want to stay because this place is awesome. I want my kids to go to the same schools I went to because it's great and it's full of life. And there's a lot of that that's happening, but we can do so much more. And if we do that, it doesn't matter where a school's going to end up, 9 miles this way or that way. People are going to come into the region because it's a region they want to be part of. It's going to be. Can I continue with this?
And Ben, if I can reiterate some of what you're saying, my name is Kevin Nagoya, I'm the director of the Tech Center. Mr. Dumont, you expressed that, hey, a lot of kids are leaving. Well, we're looking to change that. At the Tech Center, we've got a new forestry program this year. I got the state to approve a heavy equipment operations next year, electrical construction, industrial E&I. But I can only do this if the schools regionalize together. I've been approved by the state of Maine, but if we stay separate, kiss it goodbye. We are trying to educate all our children, and we want them to stay here. Do I want my children to stay here? Yes, they're graduated, but yet they're staying here. Do I want my grandchildren to stay here when they come about? Yes. But if we sit on the sidelines and say, no, the status quo is what it is, folks, we're never going to progress. Let's wake up and smell the coffee, okay? Let's be realistic here. Do we have a little bit to lose everywhere? Yes, I understand. It's not easy if this regional school is not in your community. I get that. But folks, if you're really going to stand by your word and say, I care about my children, you will put your money where your mouth is. Period. Okay?
Larry, I do think too that because part of this school is to have a business integration center.
Like, Doug Sears sitting here, okay, from J.D. Irving, major employer in this region, okay, with 3 different high schools and everything else he has going on in his life, okay, for him to go spend a day in one school, a day in another school, a day in another school, and really be working hand in hand with teachers, okay, and making connections together with teachers for learners between what they're learning in that classroom and how it applies to work in this region, that's not physically impossible, as much energy as he has, okay? But if he can go to one place and spend a whole day, then we can have him come back there on a regular basis, and that's just Doug, okay? You're a small business owner. You have entrepreneurial skills, Larry, okay? And you've learned that as you've gone. We want you to come in. We want you to talk to our students about how you developed your livelihood the way you did. Because we want other people to choose to stay here because they can make a decent living, okay? Not an easy living, Larry, but a decent living, okay? We need our kids to learn from people like you, but to have you traipse all across the St. John Valley, but if we can have you come in and sit and talk with learners all day in one place, we're going to have a bigger impact. We want kids to know what those opportunities are. Kevin hasn't mentioned that we're now working to develop a pilot program to train production workers for Twin Rivers. Because I'll tell you, if Twin Rivers folds, the economic impact, the ripples, that'll be felt from Allagash to Van Buren. It won't just be felt by Madawaska, and we can't fool ourselves into thinking that. Okay? So we all have a stake in the future of Twin Rivers paper. But so let's get together And let's start working on a day-to-day basis to train people for careers at Twin Rivers, keep them here, and help them understand that they can earn a damn decent living up here doing that kind of work.
Every kid we educate
Making
is
sense?
going to have a career someday. Not every kid is going to go to college. Some will, some won't. But every kid is going to have a career. We aspire for them to have a career. But to put them in a math class, wait for a bell to ring, then move to your English class, wait for a bell to ring, move to your science class, wait for a bell to ring, move to your next class, it's no longer appropriate. We gotta have kids getting their hands dirty and getting ready for careers. The only way we can do that is to have a fully comprehensive high school where every kid gets to experience CTE programming, and the math kids are building houses because there's a lot of geometry in math. And the kids in science, they're learning about and that, and they're doing all of those things. We've got to have more exposure to the careers and the CTE programs. It's the only way so that we can advance, because it's not happening anymore. And I'm off my soapbox. We wrote another grant. We got $715,950 in our second grant. That was called FEDES 2. From that, we got a whole bunch of new shared services, coordinator of innovation, French Acadian culture integrator. We have a French Acadian teacher who goes into all of our elementary schools and works with the kids on preserving the French language and the Acadian culture. So what Mr. Parody mentioned a while ago, we need more of, we're already doing that, and that's part of this grant. Innovation Lab, where we're having more programs for the 8th graders at the Tech Center, that Valley Unified bus, and yes, some people are for it, some people aren't. Well, we got it for free, so it is what it is. CPR and basic first aid, we have a shared food service director, we have pilot programs for innovative learning in our Project Rise, more PD, more training for our substitute teachers, which we don't have enough of. So if you want to become a substitute teacher, stop at one of our offices. Either a bus substitute driver, kitchen substitute, or teacher substitute will take you. Shared software equipment, all funded in that grant. Then this last year, our shared staffing expanded. We got awarded the school. We submitted the third grant. We voted. We had a site selection committee put together in November. Wallagrass ended their withdrawal from MSAD 27. The site selection committee met in December. St. Francis left their withdrawal process as well. People are starting to feel confident about the momentum that we had going. And yes, we had this site selection, worst nightmare of my life. I'm never getting that 10 months back. And I told myself, I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting down at every meeting. I don't want to do anything. And I tried, people. I tried not to play a part. And yet still at the end of all this, there's fingers pointed. There's fingers pointed. And during the process, there was fingers pointed. You know, what's he up to? I'm not smart enough to have a master plan. All right, so for me, this whole thing, I'm just not smart enough to be that. So we tasked these 17 people with being part of that. And I know you can't read that, it's really small. But those 17 people had a process they had to follow, and they had rules from the main Department of Ed that they had to follow. And yes, it was messy, and yes, it was ugly, and yes, it is what it is, but it was a process, and it was followed, and the determining site was, it is what it is. I'm not going to stand here and say yay or nay about that. It is what it is. But it was a process that happened, and now we have to move on to the next process to see if we can go further. Because if we're stopped here on this one, we're never going to see what could be. We're just going to be here going, yep, we lost that again. So we got the third grant in FEDES 3, $1.2 million in FEDES 3. That is what is funding this entire engineering. So a while ago, Peter mentioned it. All of the school construction costs, the engineering fees, which are really, really expensive, are all fully funded in this grant so that we don't have to take a gamble that your local tax money is going to be lost because we had a failed attempt. So that's all funded. We have software mergers. We have, when I log into my computer and I look for a student in Valley Unified, everything is merged with Madawaska and SAD 33 and 27. I can see all of the students. I can separate them by school. It's wonderful. Shared services, shared software. We have a logging simulator going to Kevin's building. We have professional development, work key certification. We're getting kids certified in work keys so that they can go to employers and say, I have this certification. Central office is regionalizing. We're sharing our services. And yes, I'm part of that. winner, winner, chicken dinner. I am the superintendent for all of it. It's awesome. It's the best job I ever had. But I'm only 25 years old and I look this old, so. But we're doing all of these things because we know, we've heard it for years, cut from the top down. We've heard it, cut from the top down. The state of Maine pays 55% of my salaries and benefit because of this regionalization. The rest is all pieced out based on your shared cost share agreement. Town of Fort Kent is paying less for a superintendent now than it has forever. You're paying less now for a superintendent. You got one heck of a superintendent. I'm not readily available in my office 5 days a week, but you know what? I'm not the type of person to sit behind a desk and just go through the motions and then collect a paycheck. I'm a mover and a shaker. And you know what? If this doesn't happen, if this fails, at least we gave it a try, and the people vote whether or not they want it or not. But if we don't even get to the point where we're saying let's give it a try, if we're going to shoot it down in the first stages, it's a lot of work for nothing. We're 5 years down. And actually, there was some groundwork before this. Before I became superintendent here, there was some work behind the scenes even before that with former commissioners of education. This commissioner, by the way, is a woman, not a male. So a lot of good things. Choice is up to us of whether it continues or it ends. That was a great timing.
Move to exit executive session. Order.
All those in favor? So, someone want to make a motion to hire Brandon Isaacson?
Move to retain Brandon Isaacson.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Do you want to recommend a designated person to represent the contact?
I move to recommend to have you be the designated contact person for the attorney.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Public discussion, re-enter. We'll continue with public discussion, but we are going to limit it to about 3 minutes per person. Carl?
So I just heard you have hired a law firm,
Yes, Brandon Isaacson.
and do we expect Valley Unified to hire a law firm also?
You're asking us to speculate on another agency's going to do. We can talk to folks. That's all we're doing. We're talking. We can't talk unless we hire them.
Okay. So is it likely?
I don't know. I don't tell Valley Unified what to do. In fact, part of the problem is that SAD 27 has very little say in what Valley Unified does. So if Valley Unified wants to hire an attorney, they'll have enough votes for it.
Okay, and if they hire an attorney, like the money for this attorney is coming out of SAD 27?
I have no idea.
For your law firm, you don't know where the money's coming from?
Oh, for our law firm, you're being unclear. For our, yes, we are paying for our own attorney.
All right. We are 60% of Valley Unified.
Yeah.
We pay 60%, and if they decide to get a lawyer, SAD 27 will pay for your law firm, and they will pay 60% of the opposing law firm. Is that a scenario that you can see?
Not necessarily.
Because
That's not in the interlocal agreement. There's nothing delineated about payment of attorneys.
It's 50% cost share, not 60.
okay, so we pay 50%.
5 years will be 60.
So we're going to be paying for, if they do, we're supposing if they do hire a law firm, we're going to pay for 50% of their legal fees plus 100% of our legal fees, if that happens.
I don't know.
Well, I think so. I think it's pretty logical.
Any other expert witnesses?
I just want to know why we're hiring an attorney. I understand that there's some concern about like the location, but that sounds like a town issue. I'm just wondering why the school board is hiring an attorney as opposed to like town council or whoever. Like, why are we as a school board hiring an attorney?
We're hiring one to look into the interlocal agreement, because currently Drummond and Woodson represents all four of us, which we're obviously not gonna get a fair assessment of what's going on. If they're looking, Drummond and Woodson represents Valley Unified, Madawaska 3327. So we want an outside party to look at the interlocal agreement that we've entered into and address some concerns we have and give us some answers on what our options are, if any. So it's just an independent.
And I haven't been at a meeting before, so I don't want to take too much time but is there somewhere that I can see what the concerns are? Like, is there somewhere where it's posted what the concerns are that created the need for an attorney?
It will be eventually. We just discussed it in executive session, so it stays right there until we get some answers and some direction.
Okay, thank you.
We expect something within the next, 2 or 3 weeks?
For Thanksgiving.
Toby, you commented that SAD 27 has little say in Valley Unified. What do you mean by that?
Currently, through the interlocal agreement, we have 3 votes of 9. So we've got a third of the voting population of Valley Unified. That means that at any time on a vote, we provide anywhere from, currently it's 50% of the budget approximately, but that's a guess, because we still don't know what assessments are. I don't think we have a firm number on how much we're paying. So if there's a $100 bill, $100 debt for Valley Unified, right now at a minimum, I believe we're paying 50%. If you look at our numbers in the next 5-6 years, our numbers go closer to 60, I think 56%. We don't currently have a vote proportionate to our contribution. Our vote is proportionate to a third. So if there's a disagreement in Valley Unified, we could end up paying all of the bill. We don't have a majority. And that's what we're talking about, and I think that's part of the interlocal agreement that we need to look at.
How much time do we have to either take this or lose it? There's got to be a time, right?
Originally, they had set a time limit when they gave us the original award, and it had a date of by 2020, concept design shall be approved. Since then, the state board has eliminated time limits for this and all projects, and they have a vague statement of as long as the projects are moving forward. So as long as we can, we have to meet with the Department of Education quarterly to kind of bring them up to speed about where we are. And as long as they see that we're moving forward, we're still okay.
So let's say the school gets here someday. Any idea when? Am I going to be alive still?
The original projection was start serving students in 2024 or 2025. That would.
The comment you answered me earlier is that you said the vote for the inter-agreement or whatever it was, that would have been like in 2018 or something like that?
It was the 2018, June in 2018, or was it 2017, when we approved the interlocal agreements? 2018.
2018?
Yeah.
That was at the school board meeting, or was that at?
That was at a public hearing.
Public hearing?
Yeah, in the gym.
It was the budget hearings.
Yep.
The open budget hearings before the budget referendums.
In 18.
That's when it would have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, just for clarification, the straw poll that's going to happen, right? That's for the phase of the site selection, correct?
Yep.
And then, so it'd be foolish for us not to vote that in so that we can get to phase 2 to understand our costs. And then the referendum vote will come, and then we can determine if we want to move forward with the costs that we know, correct?
Yeah, I have a really nice timeline for that.
There are 2 straw polls coming out before the referendum.
Yeah, one on the site, straw poll on the site, and then there's a straw poll on the concept design
Okay.
before the referendum.
Even better. So,
Yeah.
so my point there is the $100 million, we'd be foolish regardless to vote any straw poll down and get all our facts, get all our costing, and then make a wise decision, because to Larry's point, we'll understand what's it going to do to our budget, what are the deferred maintenance costs on these buildings, get rid of deferred maintenance, come out with a new building, have 0 deferred maintenance. To me, just the logic and the business side of me is saying, from an economic standpoint, it's a no-brainer, right? Deferred maintenance goes away. School figures out what they want to do with their buildings. Your efficiencies on new buildings are remarkable. If you haven't taken a trip to Sanford, spend about $150, get yourself there. Go see what a school will look like. Go to Hamden Academy. Go to UTC. If we turn this down, I sure hope that the 51% that vote against it will be at the next school board meeting to vote the budget in, because we have to fix all the deferred maintenance. That's what you guys got to be thinking about, that when you reject this, and the ones that have the beautiful signs up, when you reject this, you have to be assured that we accept future costs to all these buildings. Future costs to higher education, because our teachers are getting raises. Because otherwise, they'll be going south. They'll be going to teach at Sanford. So if you think your retirement's tough now, try retirement with no people. Thank you.
So this is what Doug was asking about. We've done step 1, which was site selection. We're now here where we're waiting to see if the Valley Unified Board will ratify the site selection determination. If the Valley Unified Board ratifies that, there will be a public hearing. There will be one right here at CHS. There will be one in Madawaska, one in Frenchville or St. Agatha, and there will be a straw poll. That's just gauging the public's perception. Do you like this site or not after it's been presented to you? All of those results will go to the State Board of Education. The State Board will then say continue, or they'll say done. If they say continue, we go into the concept design the school, figure out costs, all of those things. If that will come down to a ratification by the Valley Unified Board, and then another public hearing will happen. So you're going to see the design of the school. You're going to hear about the costs associated with the school, I hope, and all of those things. And then there will be another straw poll for that to take place. All of that will be brought again to the State Board, and the State Board will say, yes, continue to a referendum, or no. If they say yes, it goes to a referendum vote. That's where all of the voters in this district have a vote, all of the voters in 33, and all of the voters in Madawaska. All 3 votes must pass. All 3 votes, not 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 is a failure. So, and then the project's dead. Mr. Coletta.
Then, is a straw poll the combination of all 3 town voters?
It's separate straw polling. Everything's separate.
So if it fails in Fort Kent,
I don't know if a failure, I don't know if a straw poll failure will kill it. I don't know if the State Board will say continue or not. There have been some failed straw polls that were allowed to continue in other projects before. Community projects, not regional projects. And there's no straws at that poll. No, there's no straws.
Can you show the 21-step process and how there's a whole other step again?
Yep. Sarah is asking for me to share with you all. You heard me refer to the school construction 21-step process. Please find it.
It was back before this.
Oh.
Fourth one.
No, it's in my last page. I got it. This is far better than watching sitcoms all night, isn't it? This is entertaining stuff here. Okay. So this is the Major Capital Improvement Program by the state of Maine. It's an ugly, ugly chart. And I know you can't see that from where you're sitting and my big head in the way. We're at step 6 right now of the whole thing. These major bands are the big major votes. So this is where your first straw poll will happen. So after we have the site determined, the Valley Unified Board ratifies it, big vote for straw poll. Then you start designing the school, another straw poll, and then lucky number 13 is actually the referendum vote. They numbered it 13, I don't know why. That's where we have the vote. If it passes that referendum, construction is the remaining parts of the program. So that's where we start breaking ground and we start to construct the school. Is that helpful? Yeah. Let me download, because it's going to be pixelated. Let me download it first. Right here. You want me to zoom where?
When you get concept and design,
yep,
you're just going to have numbers for the construction of the building. You won't have numbers for what it's going to cost. You won't have an estimated budget to do.
What we will be, so 85% of operating is people, right? 85% of a budget is people. We'll be able to project based on numbers that are today. We can't project raises, we can't project, that type of thing, but we'll be able to use today's cost to kind of show those type of things. What I'm hoping for is we can show you the anticipated savings based on operation and maintenance that are going to be obviously different than currently between 4 buildings. Is that what you want to do? If anybody wants me to print them out one of these, I have a poster in my office. You can have one in yours too. Make it poster size.
Any additional comments or questions?
I've been wondering about Eagle Lake when they voted to go out of SAD 27.
Yeah.
They're paying tuition.
Yeah.
How much less is that than they would have paid had they stayed in? First two?
I don't know what their savings are.
Well, it's a lot less apparently.
It's a savings for them.
For them. Yeah. And the state decides how much tuition they're going to pay, not us?
The state sets tuition rates. We can't negotiate those with, we have some flexibility in transportation costs, but that's all in the withdrawal agreement. All of those things were negotiated. How much, transportation will cost and those different things, but tuition rates.
Tuitioning their students to this school also.
Correct.
Correct.
And we have a 10-year tuition agreement. After 10 years, they can choose to tuition somewhere else if they'd like. They can go to Ashland if they'd like, or I think Ashland is the only other option.
And it's about a $200,000 savings for them in this first year, Doc.
Eagle Lake?
Yeah. Yeah.
So everybody should get out of SAD 27. I'll pay tuition.
In losing, not being part of the district, you no longer have a voice in the decision process. Eagle Lake does not have a single vote in this process right here. So Eagle Lake is watching this all unfold, saying, how come we don't have a say? They're not part of SAD 27. Yeah. That's just one example. Same thing with Allagash, and the same thing with Grand Isle and the unorganized territories as well. Winterville.
So water grants were supposed to get out of SAD?
They explored it and chose not to. They chose, so they backed out of the withdrawal process. Same thing with St. Francis. They were exploring it. Eagle Lake got out, and it helped. It changes for different communities based on valuation and student population. So it's advantages. There's some advantages for some communities, others not so much.
Winterville too, they pulled out too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ben, I have a question for you. On the interlocal agreement, we determine the cost based on a combination of valuation and enrollment, correct?
50-50.
Has there been any projection as to approximately what that is right now?
Our last calculation for the interlocal agreement, because we always base that on the previous year, so that's how we set this year's budget.
This year's it's 51, 28, and 15, I think. 51, 28, 51,
29.
51.
Lucy has it. And there is a safety net in there so that in any given year, if the pupil or valuation fluctuates within a certain percentage, we have to go back and renegotiate the cost share. So there's like a safety net. And what did we set the safety net at?
8%.
8% fluctuation. So I'm not, a community withdraws and they're no longer part of SAD 27. We lose all these pupils because they're going to Ashland. We can go renegotiate that agreement. It wouldn't have to stay 50-50. Or if a big employer closes down in a community that changes valuation, then we can renegotiate.
When we renegotiate, where are we renegotiating and what are we renegotiating?
The cost share in the interlocal agreement.
And who does the negotiating, the individual boards or is it determined within the Valley Unified Board?
I think we would go back to the original way we negotiated, which was the three boards.
Ben, I have the answer.
Yep.
Currently, MSAD 27 has 56% of the students and 45% of the valuation. So the combined percent there is 51%. 33 has 15% of the attending students, 15% on valuation, so they're at 15%. And Madawaska has 28% of the students, 39% of valuation, which is a combined 34%.
So we're paying the biggest part of it.
We have five communities that feed into our budget, whereas Madawaska is alone. So it all comes out to an equitable calculation.
Lucy, do you have what just Fort Kent is?
51%.
No, but just Fort Kent.
Oh, the value of that?
Yeah.
Right now, the only thing that we're sharing is the superintendent, assistant superintendent, director of finance, director of food services.
What's Fort Kent's share of SAD 27? What's Fort Kent's share of SAD 27?
Not Valley Unified.
Not Valley Unified.
Okay, let me get that. It'll take me a minute to talk amongst yourselves.
Let's all stare at Lucy while she tries to find it. I believe it's 38, but don't quote me. I think Fort Kent is 38% of SAD 27.
What's the meeting date for ratification of the site selection?
The next Valley Unified Board meeting is on December 10th.
Correct.
6 o'clock p.m. at the St. John Valley Tech Center.
Will there be any delays in it with some of the concerns I have about the
It's already been delayed. It was supposed to be next week. It was supposed to be the 26th of November. And the Valley Unified Board allowed for extra time for this board to have some time. So it's been delayed already. Whether or not there could be more time, I don't know.
Paul Berger, Frenchville. Regarding the interlocal agreement, are all three districts, is there a time frame that's in force, timeline?
Yeah, so it was, I have it right here. And I can, if anyone wants a copy, I can. Timeline of how long you're a member?
Exactly, or can you opt out? I really don't like what I'm hearing right now, and God forbid I'm gonna say this, but it almost sounds like, I get the impression, if you're hiring legal counsel, and we see these signs up in town, certain places, there's some people that really don't care about this school. And they'd rather keep their own school, their old school.
I don't think somebody out of this district can speak and ask questions unless they've been approved.
I would approve that.
No, you can't approve it.
Yes, they can.
I think it has to be approved by a vote.
I approve it. The chair of the school board. And have a vote.
Make a motion, we allow Paul Bernier to speak.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah, but this is a public meeting, and I'm a resident, I'm in a Valley Unified District.
This is not a unified district meeting.
So, I'm just giving my opinion, and it really irks me. You have a girl sitting at the counter there saying, why don't we think about the students? Why don't we think about the students? I would have supported the school anywhere. And it's common knowledge that Madawaska is not going to support anything in Fort Kent. That's not my fault. That's not my fault. If the school would be in Fort Kent and Madawaska be on board, my hand would be up. Honest to God. But we have one option. And to go and seek legal counsel and put the brakes on this, I don't know for how long, I got a bad feeling.
Well, I think speaking for the board, Paul, that this board is 100% on board with seeing the school happen, but we do have questions that we need answered. We have to be fiscally responsible. The state process, the way it goes, is really, it puts the cart before the horse on so many things here. It's like we're choosing a site, we've unanimously chosen a site that's going to have some extra costs, like maintenance of the well system, extra transportation going there. We don't know what those costs are. We should know that before we choose a site. If this was private business, you would never do it this way. Never. You're not going to start something and not know what the costs are. Projected life of the school, 75 years. So these costs are going to stay with us for 75 years. We should know what those costs are. We're not looking to do away with the school, not by any means at all. We want it as bad as Frenchville, as bad as Madawaska. Fort Kent's taking a beating right now, which is really unfair because now that Madawaska, and I won't say Madawaska as a whole, but a few individuals in Madawaska who steered the site selection committee in their way, bullied their way through the entire process, so it was not a fair process. Not a process that we can look at some of the people in this room that are saying the school has to be in Fort Kent. We can't look them in the face and say, Frenchville was by far the best site. They won it hands down. We cannot say that and defend that right now because of the way the site selection process went.
Okay, Gary. We had a matrix set up, the first matrix. Okay, and some people work on the matrix, and it favored Frenchville. What did they do? They made a new matrix. And what was the result of the second matrix total? It still favored Frenchville. Okay, as far as fiscal responsibility, we all have our equal share based on our valuation and everything else. So Fort Kent's not going to be paying more than what Frenchville and Madawaska would be paying for whatever going down the road.
The matrix was a headache from the beginning. There were issues the first time around. There's some issues on the second time around. Things taken out that really make no sense why they were taken out. The original intent of the second matrix of having priority 1 items and priority 2 items were to weight the matrix so that a scenic view did not count the same as the cost of transportation or any other, something that was significant and important. That never happened. That's not a weighted matrix. Why have a priority 1 and a priority 2 if you don't have any weight associated with it?
I think, Paul, to answer some of that question as well, some of the fiscal concerns there is that if you look at what the enrollment has happened in each one of the districts over the past 10 or 15 years, you'll see a far greater drop that has happened in Madawaska and in the Frenchville district. So that means that looking at the next 10 or 15 or 20 years going down the road, Fort Kent will have, based on history, a lot larger of a bill to pay that's going to be there. So for these guys to take a step back and take a breath and say, you know, let's make sure that we're doing things right. Well, because based on what history has shown us, that's where the declines are going. We're all declining, but some are declining faster than others.
And I agree. But they voted, or the numbers favored Frenchville. Okay? That's gonna help Frenchville. There's, maybe not new housing, it's gonna help Fort Kent. I don't think the enrollment is gonna decline at the same level that it's been declining with this school in place.
Demographically speaking, and regardless of that, which is the aging population that's there, some of the things that have happened in each community that's there, those things are having impact on that. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think that historically speaking, that if we look at things, there's reasons why things have happened in each community. I don't think we're going to see it going forward. The growth is going to return the other direction because we have that new school put in. I think we need to have a new school, and where it ends up or whatever, I don't disagree with. But what I'm getting at is that I think that we need to take a look at what is this thing going to cost us. To my question I had earlier, we're building a box, okay? We don't know what the inside of that box is going to look like. We're going to figure that out at some point. We don't know what it costs or what it looks like. I run a business here in town. Before I built that business, I knew what that business was going to cost me. I knew what it cost to run it. And I knew as much as I possibly could about it. Now, to no fault of anyone that's in this room, is that the state decided as to how that process was going to go. And as part of that state process that is there, in some of the statutes that are there, which is, I think, as part of the approval process, numbers of savings and projections were supposed to be provided to the state to show that there was some incentive for doing this. So if we don't have numbers to look at now, they have questions, we need answers. He needs answers. So to everyone who's sitting there in this room, y'all want a new school? Let's do it. But let's get all of our facts in front of us before we start doing anything at all. So we're sitting there by the state regulations and the statutes that are there saying, oh, they're holding us hostage to it, we can't do anything. Well, you know what? Hire an attorney and find out what your rights are. Can we do anything about it in that process, or are we just going to sit back and say, hey, you know what, Commissioner, you just go ahead and do what you want to do?
So we've had a year of an approval for a school, and I think people want answers in year one when the process is a 21-step process that takes 5 to 10 years. For some projects, this takes 10 years. All right, so the answers can only come through time. And I'm not advocating for this process. I hate it. All right, and I say when you leave here, blame the state of Maine. But at the end of it all, we owe the process time to get those answers, but it's going to have to be wait for the next step to happen before we can get that. And it's frustrating, I understand. We can't have all those answers up front because that's not how the process plays out.
Ben, we could be a year and a half from now and watch the whole thing just crumble underneath us. Year and a half from now. Yeah. And
listen,
we'll be sitting here wondering what
this is every day of my life. Every day of my life.
Understood, but
so
I guess we're looking for options as they're looking for options, which is, get on the phone with someone and say, listen, this process isn't working.
Yeah.
It's not working.
Trust me.
It's working. You have
See,
time to
if you listen to what Gary said, if everything is fair, it'll roll okay. But it has not been fair to date. I've been to several of those meetings, and it was not fair, and Gary is right. It's got to be fair. If things aren't fair,
it's going to work for everybody.
It's not going to work.
It's going to work for everybody.
But I think like Doug said, Doug made a very good point. If we're not committed to anything for another year and a half, 2 years, we'll have a vote. So let's not stop this process right now. Let's keep moving forward with it. And we'll know. We'll get these answers. Right. Ultimately, we are going to have the ability to say, once we see the site, the design, the cost, you know what, it's a great thing, but we don't want it. Or it's a great thing and we do want it. But let's not kill it right now.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Thank you all for coming to a public meeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please keep coming.
Hey, Tammy, how are you? So, did a bunch of questions you asked?